Hi, I'm Alexandrian, Editor-in-Chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I find news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle and dust them off a little bit. I'm joined by my trusted financial advisor and my co-host, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, it's been 2 weeks. How's life been?
Yeah, life's been good. Went to Arizona, went to Sedona for the first time with Amanda, which was fun, and then visited some family in Scottsdale. So it was a good end of last week. But what about you? What have you been up to over the last couple weeks?
Well, Easter was lovely. And then the very end of Easter break, my mom, my sisters, and the kids and I went to Margaritaville and Cape Cod, which was fun. Love the beachy theme throughout. Good times.
Very fun. Yeah, so some fun trips there.
Yeah. I'm glad that we enjoyed our time off.
Yeah, it wasn't just filled with a bunch of work, which is good.
Definitely. So our first piece of news, speaking of work, is a partnership between LegalZoom and GoDaddy. The goal of this integration is to put more of the business creation and maintenance functions all in one place. So that would include things like creating a website and getting an LLC. When I saw this, I was like, gosh, this would have been super helpful. Like when you start your own business, you're like, I have to do all the things, and it seems so overwhelming. But I would love to get your thoughts on that.
When I first saw the headline, I'm like, yeah, this seems to make sense. You can get your domain at GoDaddy and at the same time get your LLC documents. I personally used LegalZoom for the LLC side. Yep, both did. It ends up being, at least from what I can see, one of the easiest and simplest ways to do it. Now, of course, once your situation gets much more complex, yeah, you might want to look at maybe bringing someone in or paying for upgraded services. But yeah, I think this combo makes just perfect sense to me. Not a ton of insights on it, just makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we're getting to this place that we're trying to make things easier for people, because it can just seem so overwhelming and so much. So the fact that people are paying attention to this and trying to make things simpler, I think is lovely.
Yeah, love it.
So while we're basically on the subject of marketing, our second piece of news is Intentionally's expansion with a second physical office, this one in Omaha. The financial services marketing firm already has an office in the Philadelphia area. Shout out to King of Prussia, fabulous mall there. The Omaha location, though, will be the company's hub for its event strategy and multimedia teams. This expansion is also coming at the firm's 5th anniversary. They've accomplished so much in that amount of time, so wanted to give them a shout out. Any thoughts on this one, Brandon?
Yeah, I think the big thing there is RIAs have, at least the last several years from what I've seen, organic growth hasn't been great. Now, with the market and a lot of firms being AUM, you could have almost not brought on hardly any new clients. And as long as a bunch aren't leaving, passing away, or taking large distributions, your business is going to be growing at a pretty decent clip. So I think more firms are starting to be a bit more intentional when it comes to marketing, because our space has just not been very good at it. In fact, even whenever I started learning more about marketing, I honestly wasn't looking too much inside of our own industry, but I was looking at other industries who do things a little bit better, maybe than ours. So the fact that they're continuing to grow, and I think more firms are seeing the value of real marketing and not just saying, well, marketing doesn't work because they tried meta ads for 2 weeks and just wrote it off completely. It obviously can work, and firms are clearly investing money into it, which I think ultimately benefits the end client, because sure, they're working with great firms that are taking care of clients. And so I think overall it's a positive benefit.
Love everything that you said there. Just to add, so this is an AtoZ Communications Network affiliate. Love Intentionally. And I think what was also interesting, the focus in events and multimedia. Even as I was talking today, and today I had a special guest at my Adelphi class, Denise Milano-Sprung from Midland Financial. As we were talking about the future of public relations and reporting, it was all multimedia and video and whatnot. So obviously skating to where the puck is going. But I also think events are going to be an interesting area for people, because even though we're in this very AI world and AI writes press releases, yeah, but AI doesn't create connections with people. Events arguably do.
Yeah, no, it's cool that they're layering in both, because I think almost everyone is aware of the multimedia, social media side of things, but especially for firms that are local or even just have a pool of clients that are in at least a certain geographical area, being able to bring people together for hopefully a cool experience, I think could be really neat. Could be a good growth engine.
Absolutely. So our next bit of news is Prudential's The Case of Lifetime Income study, which showed that countries could give this give the same level of retirement security to people at about a 20% lower cost if it was done as lifetime income rather than a lump sum. So I'm not going to lie, when I saw this, I figured I needed to ask Brandon about how the math's there, because vaguely I understand it, but not really. So do you mind mathing for me?
Yeah, I quite frankly don't exactly know where they got the 20% number. What from the article, what it looks like, instead of folks in their 401ks and other retirement plans contributing in what was called more growth assets, more equity based investments, they're having them invest more in, I guess it wouldn't really be investing exactly, but putting money more in the form of an annuity that might have some guarantees. So yeah, I'll pause there.
Right. So that's good to know. That is interesting, especially it seems like at least the retirement advice that I hear, particularly for those younger, and I'm sad that I'm even putting myself in younger, but
Still a
those of
millennial.
us not close to retirement by any stretch of the imagination, it doesn't seem like there's any option really other than you heavily need to be in equities unless you're just highly risk averse. So that's interesting to hear. But so another part of the press release that I loved was that it mentioned that people are basically left to their own devices not to outlive their own money, with one quote that said specifically, to plan for the decumulation phase, participants should be guaranteed adequate financial advice with a qualified and objective advisor to build holistic financial plans for retirement. And that to me was the yes, absolutely. I don't know how anybody just lives off their money unless you're independently wealthy without some help.
Obviously I'm biased, but I love that phrase, because we're really talking about two different things. Where we're talking about the accumulation phase, where we're contributing to our 401ks and other investments to hope to grow that. And then there's that decumulation phase that you mentioned there, where, okay, how do we efficiently draw down on this money? And I think that the really important piece that I heard that you just said shared there was qualified, objective, because in the annuity space, we can just simply call it like it is. I'm not anti-annuity by any stretch. I still have my insurance licenses, but they can easily get oversold, because once you can start using words like guaranteed, which of course the article used a lot of because we're talking about guaranteed lifetime income, that comes with a trade-off. And again, nothing is perfect, and nearly every financial product, service, etc., there's going to be trade-offs. So I think it's, how do you equip, how do you have the right staff training? Because let's just say, for example, someone's getting ready to enter the decumulation phase, and I can go product A and I can get an upfront payment of $50,000 in my bank account within the next 2 weeks. Or I could recommend a different approach that maybe they're paying me $5,000 a year based on their assets for the next however many years. Okay, well, clearly there's going to be some conflict. And again, the fact that there's a conflict of interest doesn't alone make one decision bad or not. But if there's not the proper education, there's not good incentive structure behind it, you can see how people might say, oh, you just need all this guaranteed money. And is that the best for them? Maybe a portion, but do they need that level? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So I think it's trying to find that balance, and how you do that, again, especially with, training the advisors up. I think that would be the biggest challenge.
Taking that and taking it one step further, it seems like part of the problem is the longevity planning, that if you're somebody who the rest of your family tends to live into their 90s, and whether that includes lots of health needs or whether that's relatively healthy or not, then obviously you've got to stretch that money much further than the people who, for whatever reason, know that they're probably not going to make it that long. But yeah, I would hope that working with a financial advisor, that they would give you the pros and cons of everything, and then the two of you have that back and forth, versus I know we were the last time that we were talking about influencers and people just harping on, always do this, do this.
Right.
That doesn't work for everybody.
Right. And even I think the article did state that the default should be the lifetime income option. And again, I feel like it starts getting tough because each situation really is so unique. And I know a lot of folks out there, probably not our listeners to be fair, but a lot of things that I see on social media talk about how, oh, we wish that we could just all go back to pensions, and 401ks are the worst thing ever. And again, we're back to trade-offs, where if we're diligent in consistently putting money into our 401ks, over the long run, it is very likely that we have amassed much more wealth compared to the old system of just pensions. The problem, though, is it requires the discipline and the intentionality. As Americans, maybe not the best at that on an overall basis, and that makes it a little bit tougher. Where, oh, the 401k isn't good. The average balance is only 200 grand at 65 or whatever the number is. Has nothing to do with the 401k. and more to do with the lack of saving into the 401k. Whereas before, your salary was probably a little less. So instead of making 100 grand and then you being responsible for contributing some amount to your 401k, maybe your salary was 80 or 85 grand and you didn't really even see money that was going into that guaranteed pension option. So again, we're back to trade-offs. I'm not saying one is for sure right, but that's why personal finance is personal and each situation is truly unique. So I will stop my fancy feelings there. What are your thoughts?
I would just absolutely agree with you. It seems like then why would there be professionals that are working with each of us if really the default answer is, you hit 65, you must do this. All right, well then ChatGPT is going to tell me what to do and I'll just go do it. If it were only that easy.
Yep, exactly. And then probably the last thing that I was going to note, because they did mention 5 countries, I think the US, Japan, Netherlands, the UK, and another one that I'm forgetting. And they talked about some of the different programs in those other countries. I think it's also worth noting that, so for example, for us, we typically are paying 6.2% more or less if we're not self-employed into Social Security, of course, a guaranteed income program for the future. And it's not been very efficient. I don't think there's going to be very many people out there that say, what's been incredibly efficient that the government has done? Social Security. I don't think we're going to have many people arguing on that side. And then people will say things like, well, the Netherlands replaces a substantially higher portion of someone's income. Yeah, but they also took a substantially higher portion of their income over the course of their career. So whenever we're looking at these different things, social benefit programs, old age survivor benefits, and things like that, we also need to factor in, okay, how much are we putting in and how much are we getting back in the future versus just making a blanket statement and saying, well, the Netherlands has a better quote unquote Social Security option than us. Okay, well, there's a lot more nuance to that. Let's pop the hood and see, well, maybe they also had less income over the course of their lives that they could have invested and likely done better than what the Netherlands government or the United States government might have been able to do. But with that, I will put a pin in my fancy feelings.
I love those fancy feelings, and you are more than entitled to have any and all fancy feelings that you want to have.
Appreciate
Just so we're clear.
Appreciate it.
So our last piece of news this week is from Tax Status and Advice.AI, which have made 12 proven tax strategies available for free to every advisor and CPA on the Tax Status platform. I thought it was also notable that this news came literally the day after the tax deadline, because as the press release notes, quote unquote, this is the best time to start saving on 2026 taxes, which is now. Among the strategies that they're giving access to for free are backdoor Roth IRAs, tax loss harvesting, and health savings accounts. I also thought that it was interesting that they noted that a little less than 40% of financial advisors are slated to retire in the next decade. So I think they were trying to peg this to, hey, we're trying to backfill, the lack of advisors. As somebody who is a tax-wise financial advisor, would love to get your thoughts on this.
I think it's great. I think the article also talked about how many consumers want their advisor or even their CPA to be doing tax planning. And you think, oh, I have a CPA, they're doing tax planning. Probably not. I mean, you're shaking your head. Well, now you're working with me, so that changes it. So your head should be shaking yes. But it just doesn't happen. In fact, I had a call with someone else and they actually paid me to review their draft return from 2025. To be fair, they didn't realize I was doing taxes this year and will be working with me next year on that strategy. But they're like, why didn't my CPA even tell me to do something as simple as adjusting withholdings? Because they had a surprise tax bill, and it was because their W-2 job didn't withhold enough. And in a nice way, a lot of CPA firms, they're tax prep shops where they're just trying to run people in and out, like your H&R Blocks and Jackson Hewitts, and they're not really focused on that strategy piece, and they're not charging for it either. But I think where the true problem comes in is the expectation. The client thinks, oh, I've paid my CPA $500 to do my taxes. That means I get tax planning and tax strategy throughout the year. That simply doesn't happen. So the firms that are doing well in the tax prep space, in my humble opinion, are ones that are, yes, doing a great job on the tax prep, but then also either one, setting expectations and saying this fee covers tax prep only. If you want to get tax strategy, tax advice, proactive planning, I have another advisory level service, or I charge X per meeting, but really setting expectations. And I think that really helps a lot of people, because then they're not going to be surprised if the firm said, hey, we're not doing tax planning for you. Well, they can't really be terribly too upset if they then don't get the tax planning piece.
Right. You're not wrong, but then it makes me wonder. So, is it that as the consumer, and I'm going to label myself here because I am, is it being called tax planning when it's very much not? And then in that case, to me, that's deceptive on the professional side, because why are you calling it something that you're not giving it? But then if it's on the consumer side and that we're just not understanding, like, look, $500 doesn't get you very much these days. Why did you think that you were getting tax savings throughout your whole financial life for $500? That I totally get too. Or is it some mixture of the two things?
Yeah, that's a fair point, right? How could you expect a holistic tax strategy for $500, so to speak, assuming you at least have a business? A lot of business returns are gonna fall in, if they're simple Schedule C type businesses, in that $500 range. So there's probably some misunderstood expectations. Again, I still am putting it a bit more on the professional and the CPAs that, for example, in my tax prep engagements, I specifically have phrasing in there that says what is not included, and it's tax strategy, meeting throughout the year, unless we've already had a previous conversation. So I try to very clearly spell it out and set expectations. So I think, again, I am going to blame CPAs a bit more. Also, consumers probably should curb expectations. If they're not paying very much, yeah, probably not going to get very much in return too. So probably a little bit of both, but again, I still am going to put a little bit more on the CPA side, or we say CPA, but tax preparer, accountant, et cetera.
Yeah. But so then for the consumers who do want this tax planning, so from your standpoint, should they be going to that CPA who's doing the tax prep and then understanding, like, look, yeah, I get it. It's April 13th. We got to get my taxes done. But come May, June, whatever other time of the year you want, can we sit down and talk about my taxes? Or should they be going to their financial advisor and just figuring that person isn't arguably tied to any particular time frame and they can sit with me whenever? Or does it really matter?
Each situation, I think, is going to be unique on that. So, I mean, if you already have a great relationship with your accountant, maybe ask, hey, do you have a different level of service where we can talk about being more proactive and doing more planning and strategy? If you're already working with an advisor, who I think, in my opinion, the easiest way to tell how deep does your advisor do tax planning, do they request your tax returns? Even if they're not doing prep, do they request your tax returns? Because we've got a lot of great tools on the advisor side where we can look at things more holistically. So if they're not asking for those and reviewing those for you, probably not doing terribly too detailed tax planning. So then at that point, maybe ask your accountant. And again, it's interesting because accountants have a lot of additional built-in trust. Like, so many times, it happened even more earlier in my career, it's like, well, let me talk to my accountant about this. It's like, your accountant doesn't understand your situation holistically oftentimes. They're really doing mostly prep for you, minimal planning at most, but they still have that level of trust because it's like, oh, it's my accountant. Mm-hmm. Versus sometimes a planner is like, oh, you're just the investment person, depending on how they've positioned themselves. So I think there is a lot of built-in trust, even at times when, like, someone might be like, my guy or my gal is okay. I feel like I could be getting more. They still sometimes can have more trust with them than, maybe a random financial advisor, which I find interesting. Which, with that, what are your thoughts? Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think, again, stereotypically, accountants almost have more built-in trust than maybe the advisors?
So my thinking was that, and I'm sure that it depends on the person, but from my standpoint, taxes I could very much more easily screw up than my investments, or at least in my own head, I would feel that way, to the extent that we all know now, we didn't have AI a while ago, but AI could give me an investment portfolio and I go do it and we call it a day. But at the same time, are they going to get everything right on my taxes? Maybe, maybe not. So I think that it's that level of feeling like, well, as steadily things within financial planning got chipped away, and you can get stock information and trade and whatnot online, and people feel like, I have that expertise, I got the report on the whatever, I know what I'm doing here, I have no idea what the hell to do with my taxes. That would be my guess, personally.
Yeah, honestly, that makes a lot of sense. It just feels like it'd be much easier to screw up your taxes than a long-term, broadly diversified portfolio, for example. And if your perception is advisors are just investment people, which historically really has been the case. I mean, it went from broker, literally you had to talk to an advisor to trade a stock or buy a stock or sell a stock. And then it was more mutual fund sales. And then it was about asset allocation, and only in the last decade or so getting in more into the planning side of things. So that's fair. So if, hey, I can probably handle my own investments. My 401k is set up, it's on the default, but man, if I don't do these taxes right, and I think a lot of people might have that fear of, I'm going to go to jail if I get this wrong. Very unlikely. that you could make a genuine mistake and end up in jail. But nevertheless, that still is there versus like my portfolio's fine enough. So yeah, that's a good take. That makes a lot of sense to me.
You know what though, but so going back to the last piece of news that we were just discussing of people in the decumulation phase and worried about outliving their money, it seems like though it's a narrow view to think that you can handle your financial planning or even just your investments yourself. Because on the one hand, in the moment at 41, I feel like I can handle it. I got it. 80, and it's like, oh, I don't know, that pot's a little smaller than I thought it was going to be. It might just be a little short-sighted on people's perspectives as well.
I think that's a great point too. And that is really, I mean, why do most advisors target pre-retirees and retirees? One, because they have a lot of money or more money on average compared to a 30 or 40-year-old. Yep. But also I think to your point, it's a lot easier to see, oh, I might've been okay to invest my money. How do I take distributions from it? To your exact point, Allie, that pain point I think is a bit more tangible versus, again, we're going to do comprehensive financial planning. No one has ever woken up with that problem in the middle of the night, but they have probably woken up with, shoot, am I going to run out of money? That's a very real pain point, especially when people are closer. And then two, did I get my taxes done? I literally have to do it by this deadline. So it's almost that pain point is a lot more pronounced in both decumulation, which would be, okay, I need an advisor then, or obviously taxes, because it's just very clear versus what the heck does holistic and comprehensive financial planning mean?
Maybe the industry will start figuring that out. And I think, and maybe it's just the echo chamber that we're in, but it seems like those are two of the words that are like, if you say that, it goes in the swear jar. We do not use those words anymore. We've really got to get more to the grassroots of what we're actually doing versus just comprehensive planning.
Right. And again, just selfishly, that's why I started doing tax prep again, because I feel like it's been a lot easier to, one, have a lot more conversations with people. It's been easier to get people to refer and then see, oh, you do not just the tax prep, but we're talking about the strategy. Oh, I really want the strategy. Yes, I have to get the prep done and I'm confident that you're going to do it correctly, but I really care about this other strategy piece. But if it weren't for that initial conversation of the pain point of it's April 10th and I need to get my taxes done, or it's even February and I know I need to get my taxes done, some of those conversations just don't happen enough. So I am starting to see, again, could just be my echo chamber as well, to your point, but other advisors in my circle are starting to do more of even the tax prep side to some degree in-house. I think we're all trying to solve a similar pain point where have more conversations with people, make sure the taxes get done correctly, because geez Louise, I see it done very poorly. And just even my first year doing prep, it's pretty bad. But also, let's focus on the planning side, and it's much easier to get someone interested in that once they've already experienced how they've worked with me or how they've worked with my buddies who are also doing prep for those.
Yeah. And thank you guys for doing that. Because again, getting even to our first bit of news of just places being a one-stop shop and that you know that everything is being taken care of in one place. You already trust this person. I think that's brilliant on your part. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
Cool. Well, it's been another fabulous week. May you continue to have a beautiful, I'm sure, sunny and lovely weather out there. We have some of that too, although it's going to rain later this week.
Yeah, well, enjoy some of the sun as well. But I'll keep sending some your way. But it's going to be sunny and 70 today.
Please. We're going to need that tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. For tomorrow. We'll save it for tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Allie.